Uh-oh. I have video issues.
Uh-oh.
All right. Well, we are live, and there are no Tommy and Seth because I screwed up the videos. So let me
here.
But we are here.
Here, Mike.
We are here.
Good thing it's a podcast and nobody
Yeah,
cares
right.
what we look like. Happy Tuesday.
We'll edit this out. We'll edit this out of the actual podcast.
What happened?
Oh
Why?
goodness.
Oh,
stuff-
yeah.
Oh hey,
See,
what's up,
now,
Mike?
now we're just gonna rotate through people.
What the heck?
So, welcome.
We
to
should
the
change up
podcast.
where everybody is.
We're
on
all sitting in
YouTube.
different spots.
I'm Mike Carlo today.
Wow. You know what? I think I'm going to go to the technical issues screen because I'm having so many technical issues.
Please hold.
Goodness.
What is it doing?
This is why Mike shouldn't show up 5 minutes before.
True statement. It looked like
so
it was
strange.
working, and then I get to the screen, and there's like nothing there. And Seth Cam is not the Seth Cam. And what the heck? What is it doing? Okay, that works. Okay, Tommy Cam. Let's grab that one. Good man. How did I botch that so bad? I had a user group on Monday. That's what's probably screwed it up. All right. All right, ready to retry again. We're going to go back in again. All right. This is the retry. Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Michael can't computer, so figured that technical issue out. Got it all dialed in. We got the people videos in the right place. Whatever. My mind is fried. It was a late night last night. So here we are. Tuesday. Let's have a good conversation and hopefully less tech issues than before.
For the sake of the actual podcast, we'll start with a true intro like it never happened.
True until like it never happened. All right.
Happy Tuesday.
There we go.
Good.
How you doing, gentlemen?
Good Tuesday morning to you. Welcome to the Explicit Measures Podcast with Mike, Tommy, and Seth. Today we're going to be talking about some fun stuff around degree or not to degree, and we're not talking about the temperature. We're talking about education at this level. So we're gonna jump into this topic. This was a topic that came up at the end of our Power BI user group last month. We do like an hour-long user group session, and then we kind of let anyone who's online listening kind of jump into a Teams chat, and we all kind of just talk about Power BI things. And this kind of was a hot topic that came up, and well, of course, if there were different opinions, we will talk about it. So here we are. So anyways, Tom, you want to frame us out here a little bit? Let's give us some of the topic items here. What's this topic all about?
So today, when it comes to degrees, again, the origin of today was after one of our user groups. We're doing our networking, a little chat with everybody, and everyone kind of got into it on actually, could you actually do Power BI and be successful if you never went to college? And that was the frame of the initial question. Some of us were drinking a little, so and it was very tired. So maybe
It was a lively conversation.
Lively conversation.
Statements might have not been framed in a straightforward way, but it led to an interesting
But then
idea.
we weren't recording it.
Yeah, we'll edit that out too. We have that ability, but it led to, like, for all of us, as we reflected on our own career in Power BI,
Yep.
not one of us learned Power BI in college.
Correct.
Too old.
Too old. You're right. Yeah, because Power BI obviously came out, but here we are doing a podcast. Microsoft, this is our livelihood. So
Yeah.
led to the thought, like, okay, could you get away without going to college and actually be successful? Not just do Power BI, but one, I think the frame of today is, could you land a job without going to college in Power BI? Could you be successful in it? And then drawbacks, or what you need to know if you were to not get a degree or an education, or if there's any at all.
Yeah. I think this is a very relevant topic, especially for those who are thinking about getting into Power BI, or individuals who are starting their career. Like, what do you pick? I do know the audience of our podcast, and most of them are like early career people. They're not in college age, based on our user metrics that we have so far. So Sorry, you've already got an education if you have one. You're stuck with whatever you've got at this point. However, though, there's this is a really relevant topic, and I guess from our backgrounds, I mean, Tommy and Seth, you guys came. Well, let's start there. Where was your background, and where did you study in college? And I guess we'll start with that point, and then we are doing Power BI now.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like
Go ahead, Tommy.
all right.
Take
it.
it.
This is a great Tuesday, man.
That was my
yeah,
bad. That was a bad throw. I just threw it in the air to
no
both of you
problem.
at the same time. That was
We both did the same pause, but I know we've said this in a lot of the previous podcasts, like the background for a lot of us. So
Yep.
my background was sociology and psychology. That's what I majored in college. Initially wanted to do philosophy and theology, and then I realized very quickly that
wasn't
not
a
like
very
so,
profitable career move, so you
or
decided to change it to
opportunity.
something.
I'm like, so I'd have to teach and then keep going to school. Okay. Or
Yeah.
so basically, or go to the seminary and become a priest. I was like, and actually that's another story for another day. So, but anyway, so yeah, so that led to looking into psychology, and then sociology I loved personally because I did love the behavior side of it. And basically, for those who are not aware, sociology is basically the study, the theorizations of people in society, why people behave the way they do when it's a group of people that could be as small as 5 people, or even when you're dealing with a civilization or a town, a country. Why do people react certain ways? Why basically, why do we have the framework that we do? Why do we work 40 hours? All that kind of things that go into it. And
Yep.
there was a lot of data, but I was never considering a career in analytics or business intelligence. So we'll fast forward, graduate, then realize, what do I want to do? Because really was not thinking that far forward.
Yep.
Then I started researching careers after I graduated, which was great.
Nice.
I worked at a storage unit and drove a golf cart to basically call people when they didn't lock or they didn't pay. So that was great while I was researching careers. Anyways, fast forward, looked into marketing and PR, really thought that was interesting. Maybe I could apply it. Worked in a marketing agency, and immediately I became the analytics guy. I always loved numbers, and then
well, baseball was your first entry into that, right?
baseball. I
Statistics all the way through.
I used to take newspapers of the baseball stats in what grade? 4th grade, and I would write it down because obviously there was no computers, and so all the Yankee stats, every game, box score, I would write it down so I could keep a running record. And so I should have really applied that and said, "You love this. This
do numbers.
You can do something with it." Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was my education, was sociology, and there was a little focus on social statistics, but again, never applied that. So I'll stop there when it comes to an education background.
Yeah, Seth, what's your background?
I'm going to preface this conversation slightly different than previous ones, where we've kind of enlightened, kind of how we came up through things. From an educational perspective, that kind of, I think, shaped a lot of who I was even in school. Right. The first was I read as a child, and all the way to today, ferociously. Always had books, always, all the time, and especially as a child.
Yeah.
And that, I think, was probably the best thing that I'd ever done, because reading comprehension, vocabulary, like all of that just came with it. Like those SAT tests, all the tests, reading comprehension, like I was done 40 minutes before anybody else.
Wow.
Because like it was just reading and comprehending what's in large swaths of data,
Yep.
Or information, was something I just learned from as a young child, right? In terms of school, never the best, just didn't have the motivation to look at a school subject and want to go crush it. So in college or high school, I was more of the just sports, found, art, and I was good at ceramics and sculpture when I found out that right off the bat in high school, and that's what I went into college, because I didn't know what I wanted to be. I was 18 years old. You graduate from high school, you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So
it's a lot of pressure to be 18 and know, like, okay, what do you want to do for the rest of your life at 18? Like, that's a pretty big decision.
So I had a path, to, I would say, not pay the full extent of college.
Yeah.
And went to a liberal arts
Oh
college.
my
Wow.
word.
Tuesday
Oh,
morning.
man.
Um, and studied art, so
Yep.
sculpture and photography.
Yep.
Philosophy is, was going to be a minor, but wasn't. So you basically just do the whole spectrum of topics and covered courses and things like that. None of which I use to this day. I will say flippantly, right now, as a result of not being the grade A student, or looking at the life experience that I have and where I've come from, I don't equate a lot of that to school. Is that to say I didn't learn things or have experiences there? No, I'm not discounting that.
Yep.
And I would love for any of the audience to say, hey, you're probably glossing over all of these things that school offered. But in general, I don't put a lot of weight on how or where I've come from the effort or experiences I gained in college.
Yep. Yep. So I'll give a quick background on mine. My education was came up through high school, loved numbers, tried some of the sports, had asthma and allergies, and just never really got into it very hard. And I was like, you know what?
It'll be a blocker.
It'll be a blocker. It's gonna kind of, breathing is usually essential for sports and activities. So quickly figured out, like, you know what? I'll use my brain muscle. That's the one I'm gonna exercise. So I just got really into just being like thinking about stuff and working on. I loved mechanical things. Loved mechanical stuff. I was one of that kid who would always take stuff apart, but I could put it back together and it would still work. And that was just fun for me. I really enjoyed that part of it. So I went on to get my degree in mechanical engineering. It was good. I wasn't the best at it. I went to a really hard private school. I just felt like it rattled my cage, actually. I don't think I really learned how to learn, honestly. I went through high school. I did really well, but it wasn't very challenging. So I didn't really have to get in there and dig to understand how to learn. I guess I had good teachers, or the content wasn't very hard. I don't know what it was. But I got to college, I got wrecked. I did not know how to study. I was not very diligent with my time. This kind of portrays myself into my later years. I'm still very like last minute to get to everything, and that's just how I am.
Do it better.
You just do it better now. But got through my mechanical engineering degree, loved that, and then I got in the business side of things. I was very heavily at Excel. I found Visual Basic on the back end of Excel. I needed, frankly, my company didn't want to buy me Minitab, which is like a very cheap program for a subscription. I was like, screw this. I'm going to build my own statistics program, and I'm going to build it inside Excel. So I delve into like statistics and programming and like how to make everything work. And I made my own custom ribbon. I just went really deep into it, and I thought, this is really fun. I really like this programming side of things. Sadly, my college didn't have a computer science or programming classes that I could really get into, and I think I would have enjoyed that better. So I liked, when I was doing AutoCAD or SolidWorks was the program of choice at the time. Making things on a computer in 3D were awesome. Absolutely loved it. I really had a ball and had a lot of fun with doing that kind of stuff. So fast forward now to like where we are now. We're all in the Power BI space. I've gotten a little bit more training around the data space. So I went to get half a master's in data science, and then I got an MBA, which I think the MBA was almost useless for me. Right? Maybe a little bit more useful now that I'm owning my own business a little bit. Teaches some basics, but I feel like the best class I took, and I think someone on the chat was actually talking about this. Donald, I think, was saying this on the chat, was people should be taught statistics in high school. And doggone it, like I didn't even get statistics in college. I got my statistics classes inside my MBA, and those classes were I had the lightweight version of statistics. Yeah, so I got statistics there. That was a really good class, and I applied it a lot, and it helped me understand a lot of what's going on in the manufacturing space. So that really helped out my career in like the engineering world. And then when I got to my master's in data science, I took another statistics class. So I took 3 statistics classes, and it was much, much easier. And boy, there's a lot to statistics. There's a lot you can learn there about numbers. It's really, really cool stuff. Anyways, that's kind of our background. But here we are now in the, we're in our careers. We have Power BI. That's what we're doing. Do we need a degree to get to where we are? This is going to be
So
a challenging question, I think.
so I think now that we have the background of education,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
What I'd love to do in a shorter form is go around and say, was your education the reason you are where you're at today? And if we want to
Yep.
if we want to narrow it down, what are the specific experiences you lean on that you would say are like the nuggets for people to, you know, say, well, why Tommy are you, talking on the podcast, and why are you, a leader of Power BI in your organization? Is it because you went to school, or was it like, what efforts or things would you dial in and say were the most important for where you're at?
Wow, this is
So
really reflective.
yeah, I'll answer the first question you posed about what from college, if anything, are you applying today? And going back to the sociology and the social statistics, I kind of felt lucky that I fell into that, and now I'm into a business analytics space
Yeah.
because it really, I mean, again, never did it with the dream of doing anything with numbers.
Yep.
But I use that honestly a lot when it comes to, just taking any data or numbers, even if it's, like a public data, and saying, does this look right? Uh, are we looking for outliers? So, and I use that constantly now with our reporting or like just how I approach any data set at all is, what are the variables? What could affect this? How can we outline, the big significant changes? Because that's all we did with social statistics. But again, that was lucky. Like, that's lucky that I did that, and now I'm working in Power BI. So you can't.
I'm sure.
Sure,
I'm not
sure
sure.
you could say it's college, but you can't like.
Went through luck at it. I mean, you'd probably finding things that you're interested in at some point. I think statistics
I
is
didn't
such
want
a
to take the class.
well. I think
I
statistics
had
is
to.
true. But I think at some point in time you would have hit statistics, whether it had been in school or not. But I think at some point, either in your career or somewhere else, you would have hit statistics at some point, and it would have been either you do a lot of self learning. But yeah, that's
Yeah, I hit it in high school because my
yeah.
dad, he was an engineer too. And every time he's like,
Ah,
"Listen, let me show you math." And I would show him the problem in my answer. He's like, "You're not doing it right." I'm like, "That's how the teacher taught me." He's like, "They're not doing it right. Do it the right way."
oh
So two
wow,
plus two became like 5 pages.
oh geez,
It's like, I don't like math. And that's what, that's actually what happened. Like, this is not fun. But yeah, I mean, I, so that's honestly probably the only thing from college that I could say is a takeaway
sure.
in what I lean on now.
I,
The nuggets of what I'm doing now and I apply, it's honestly, it's the use of the tool, being able to have the opportunity to get into it early,
yep,
but also just the I would probably say the community. So the amazing resources and articles and blogs out there.
correct.
I rely on all the time, sample files that people have done and try and go, how'd they do that?
Yeah,
And the books, and then just I think doing it over and over and over again. And then just being able to have the opportunity to build a report, and poorly in the beginning, and that was okay
sure.
because it wasn't like there was a BI, platform or BI team at the company I was at the time. So it was like everyone was starting fresh when it came to reporting. So I was able to kind of learn what was working, what was not.
Nice. Seth, you want to hit yours?
Yeah, experiences wise, I would say not school, right? Reading, and
Mhm.
starting that from a very young age and continuing on with it,
Yep.
whether in whatever form, fiction, nonfiction, etc. I think for me, the restaurant and hospitality industry was a huge
Hmm.
benefit, much more so in terms of learning how to deal with people and conflict resolution, and being,
Mm.
it's not an easy industry to have.
Sure.
You have very, very pleasant experiences the vast majority of the time.
Yep.
But
There's some very sour ones
like
too.
there's nothing like getting yelled at for a wrongly cooked steak or something, right? Like
Well, frankly, something you didn't even do, right? I
oh
mean,
man, the
someone else
pure
cooked it.
joy that some people have in going and berating waiters and waitresses, is a
Wow.
special kind of person. But they exist, lots of them. But yeah, I mean, you're in a position where your job and your livelihood revolves around you being kind and nice,
Yep.
right? And you can't teach that high pressure, thing. So
Mm.
I'd say restaurants, hospitality, like
True.
everyone should at some point in time go into the hospitality industry, whether that's hotels or restaurants, just to be able to experience what it's like to deal with high pressure situations where you try
Mm.
to diffuse the situation. Um, I would say in general, I was always naturally curious, want to be better in whatever job I've done, right?
Yeah.
That isn't necessarily a learned skill. It's just something I think you have or don't.
Yep.
And people you meet, right? So it's the
Connections.
relationships that you build,
Yep.
the connections, because there's a shared work ethic, and you gravitate towards those people that are doing their job, trying to do that above and beyond, right?
Yeah.
The thing that kind of launched on top of that then is, when I went from restaurants to transition into business, that was because I got married. And at some point, my wife and I were like, yeah, we know the restaurants are going to, run their course. But it was through relationships in restaurants that I actually got an opportunities to, go interview in businesses that I didn't know the world of data or anything like that. I was in fine dining.
Yeah.
But that's how that opportunity grows. So, you don't know in the growth of your life who you're going to lean on or, reach out to at some point in time. But it was through that getting into the business side of things, being bored with what I'd learned and working, that I got interested in SQL.
Yeah.
So that self-learning, picking up a book, start writing code,
Yep.
and then also
Served
leaning
you well.
on
Yeah.
friends and coworkers to help. They gave me their time to walk through concepts and
Yep.
apply it to the business and learn in that very methodical, like I can apply this to something I'm doing kind of thing, was really the launching point of me getting into the technical space. I'm not a math guy. What? Like no formal education in numbers or data, but I understood business.
Yeah.
So when you can, I think my trait, or the good thing I'm good at, is solving problems, especially in randomized data. And that was an experience that you only get in practical business, methods, where you're looking at raw data and trying to figure out, like, well, I know this should align somehow because of the business logic and all the things I know about our business. But that's a practical learned thing. You can't do that in a book. So I think ultimately those were the key experiences that I had, that kind of started to influence a lot of the trajectory of the second half of my career. If you want to call restaurants the first half, that was the first half, right?
Sure.
So Seth, I also had experience in the hospitality. I was a front desk receptionist at a spa, which quickly changed because apparently the feedback was I wasn't the most peaceful first impression in college because I had long
what's
hair.
the matter with you? Welcome.
I had a Hawaiian shirt and my hair was my dad's just huge.
What?
So they immediately made me the towel guy. So
the towel guy.
You joke about that, man. Like one of the biggest challenges I had were I had a cadre of people who loved sitting at my bar and eating dinner, because conversationally, I can be decent. But man, the feedback I got every single week: Seth, you need to smile more. Like, you terrify guests, because like we joke about my RBF here, but like when I'm not smiling, like people are like, "Welcome," like, "Here's our bartender, Seth." And just
that's hilarious.
What can I get for you?
You should have leaned into it a bit more. It'd been like
oh, dude,
what's the restaurant where they yell at you? They swear at you at?
Oh, Ed
DeBevick's,
isn't it?
Yeah. Could have worked there. Hello, welcome.
The dry humor would have gone a long way.
So,
what about you, Mike?
So I think you guys have made some really good points there, and I would say I think my engineering degree really helped me work through problem solving. That's the majority of. I love this whole concept. I'll give you an example of what has recently annoyed me substantially. Was I like to approach a problem. I don't necessarily know the answer, but I like to research it, try something, and then figure out what went wrong or what is the root cause. Then go back and review it, and then come back with another solution. So I'm a big proponent of repetitive testing and coming up with good solutions. That's just something that's how my brain works. That's kind of how what I did on my own before I got to college. And so I think that was very much reinforced in my college days. And we have a Pinewood Derby race at our local church, and we do it. And so it's a one and done. And it really bothers me because I can't go to the track like a week or two ahead of time
The
and
test.
try my theories on, do I bend the axles? How much graphite did I put in? Did I spin the wheel enough? Did I polish the axles enough? Like I don't get the opportunity to test it. I had to wait another whole year to run the car again because it's like literally you show up, you race, and you're done, and you come back next year and you can do it again. I'm like, oh, it grates me so bad because it doesn't fit my process. So that was one thing I think from college that I took away that I really enjoyed. I think another one I will put in here. It was probably a college learned thing. Mechanical engineering was very hard for me. I am not a book person. I do not do well in memorizing things.
Mhm.
I'm much more of a process and a understanding personality. Like if I understand what's going on, I feel much more capable to know how to repeatedly do something. So I boil everything down to like the most basic fundamental block I can get to, and then I once I understand that, I can interpret what's coming ahead. Like what, taking that basic principle and then projecting onto a new problem, I can figure out things that way. So that's kind of how I learn. So I did not know that, and I felt like a lot of my mechanical engineering space was just memorizing things.
Mhm.
Differential equations was very hard for me. Physics, no, chemistry class was a very challenging class. I was like, I don't, this is not my thing. So I definitely learned very quickly like there were certain things that I enjoyed doing, and I liked working in just doing math and numbers. Algebra was really fun for me. I enjoyed that a lot. Calculus, I enjoyed that as well. So I think those were areas that I think I did well in. Those don't directly relate to what I do in Power BI. I think it was more around when I look at my schooling, and I probably have weirdly more schooling than most people. I tried a lot of different things, and for whatever reason, I was a glutton for punishment for a number of years. I did an MBA in 2 years, and then I started on my master's in mechanical engineering, and I did a year of that, and then didn't want to do that, and then I moved on to the master's in data science, and said that's what I want to do. I want to be in the data space more, so I put more time there. And so the early classes in my data science class were, I think, very relevant to what we do now, or what I do now: databases, working with large amounts of information, understanding the infrastructure of like what Hadoop and what Spark was doing. It's like those big data technologies are just now kind of getting into the school arena. What I would say though is I'm now I guess a teacher, professor. I don't know what you would call me. I teach classes at UWM, University of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and being one who's now on the other side teaching new students, colleges are not very quick to adopt Power BI, and for them being very forward thinking and thinking ahead on things, um, they're still very much, from what I've experienced, they're pretty much Tableau still. They're kind of like in this old mindset. So I think even now, going to school just for Power BI isn't incredibly relevant because the schools haven't adopted it yet. It hasn't been around long enough. And I felt like a lot of stuff I was learning in schools, particularly even my SQL stuff, I would come to Seth, and he's a SQL guy, and I was like, "Why is my professor telling me to do the SQL this way?" He's like, "That's like 10-year-old SQL. Like, don't do it that way. That's not how you would write it." And I was like, "That's what I thought." And I would write a different way, and I
True
would get,
story.
I, I got marked down. And he's like, "That's not how we write this stuff." And I'm like, "What gives?" Anyways, so my SQL class was good. Felt like that was very relevant. Um, my data warehousing classes and the big data classes, moving lots of data, struggling with Hadoop, those were good classes, and I feel like those serve me very well now. At the time, though, when I was at the Power BI stage, there was no education that was available that talked about any of those things. That technology wasn't even really out then. Maybe in some early forms of it, but not when I was going to school. So, um, those would be my kind of key things. It's learning the engineering process, testing, experimenting, making a hypothesis, trying something out, doing it. And then I would say later on in my career, I started aligning more of my education around what I wanted to be doing.
So it seems we all have, I think we're all on the same opinion that you can't really learn Power BI in college, nor is any of our experience aligned with, oh, if I didn't have this degree, like if I didn't get my bachelor's in this, I would never be able to do Power BI. I think we can all, in a sense, agree on that. Our education and our technical skills did not apply to college. Some of it did, some may help, but at the end of the day, you don't necessarily need a degree. And I think that's my initial opinion. However, I don't think you can get away with it. And I say that this is kind of going back to our user group, but all my education in Power BI, all of my experience working with data was a marketing agency using Google Ads, trying to figure out, what keywords and trying to figure out the variables. And if I apply more money here, how will that affect things? It was getting that experience, right?
Yep.
Just working with numbers. So
I think you're making a really good point, right? Because you're jumping in, you're saying like the education is some part of this to a degree. There's maybe some soft skills or some other skills, but the meat of this whole thing is time in seat and real world experience is probably, again, this is what I've kind of learned as well. Like the school stuff is good. The college is a great thing to learn and go through, but it's what it's what it's up here.
Mm-hmm.
That's what people are trying to acquire and buy. And that doesn't, what I learned up here, there's a lot of other influences, especially the farther you get away from that college spectrum, that a GPA doesn't do me justice anymore, right? It's now more about like, look at all the other stuff that Tommy and Mike and Seth have done. There's a podcast. We're talking about these topics. We're building these things. We have these solutions that people need answers to. That becomes more of an emphasis on who we are and what we do for career-wise.
I can't help but think, though, there had to be something in college, though, in 4 years of going to class, of especially with an engineering or in my, again, like sociology, of like trying to understand behavior, that had some impact, that maybe you could still do Power BI without a degree, but would you be at the same technical skills? Would you, in a sense, would you be the same person using Power BI, doing the same solutions, had you not gone to college at all?
I feel like grit is a good portion of what I needed to learn in college. Grit it out. There was classes that I went through that were not fun, but it was pursuing it and sticking it out and just making it through. And I feel like I'll be point blank very open about this. Everything I learned about Power BI is already on the internet. Like anyone, like I teach it. There's a million books about it. You can go, like to Seth's point, you can go get a book and read about analysis services. You can just jump in there. All this stuff is technically open and available for you to become an expert in this area. You can do that. Now the opportunity, so this is where I think this is going to get interesting. The opportunity for a company to hire you, there is a stigma, or not stigma, there is a,
I think that's a good word.
Maybe stigma. There is a, you can't get a job unless you have a degree. And so I think in order for this, what we're talking about here, do I need a degree or not? It's really up to the hiring companies. And so I think it comes to a point of when people are getting hired into positions, are companies really choosing people based on capability and what they've done? Because had I spent my 4 years, let's just spitball here. Let's just say Power BI was out. Had I spent my 4 years working for companies that were doing the businessy things, working in Power BI and teaching me on the job stuff, I would have come out 4 years later way better than in engineering. Like I would have, but I didn't. Again, this is one of these things. I didn't know what I was going to be now when I was looking back at myself at 18. I had to make a decision. Like I kind of like this engineering stuff. I'll stick with that.
So retrospectively, Tommy, I want to agree with you, right? College may in quotes have provided value that I'm utilizing. I just can't say like this was a pivotal thing, right? That I learned. And since I can't do that, right, and I can do it for how I got to where I am, to me that's like, okay, that's life experience. And that doesn't necessarily need to be in college. Where I struggle right now, and I probably have an unpopular opinion as I look at my kids, right? I think there is an industry change where a college degree in the past meant that you were going to get a job that was life sustaining, that you could buy a house and support a family. That is no longer the case. In fact, it's the complete opposite. college did not cost you
Yeah.
nearly as much as it does now.
Agreed.
It puts kids in massive debt after 4 years, and there is no guarantee of like a job that's going to sustain you. So in if that's my spectrum, I now have to look at
Yeah.
analyzing whether or not it's worth it. Because if on average kids are coming out with a liberal arts education at almost $100,000 in debt, where's the value to that experience? And when I'm saying as an individual, I can't equate back the pivotal things I learned to why I am in the career I am, there's a disconnect there in my head, right? So I'm not an expert, right? I did go through college. I got a bachelor's degree. I'm not suggesting that, it didn't have some shaping of my life. However, if I look at my kids and I say, okay, as they grow up in, 15 years or whatever, is college going to be worth it for them? Or do I pick alternatives from the standpoint that I think life experiences are absolutely important? So do I focus more of my time on having the kid intern for 3 or 6 months at a company?
Yeah.
Try out data, try out being a mechanic, try out hospitality. Like, what are the really important things that have shaped me as an individual, or things I wish I could have done that I didn't because I didn't have that life experience?
Yep.
And I just say, hey man, you get a free pass from 18 to 22. Like, you can live in my house, but like, here's the things that you're going to be doing during that time to set you up for a job in something that you like. So it's in my mind, I'm playing around with this thought of,
Mhm.
because we all say no, you don't need a degree in Power BI, like
Correct.
to learn Power BI.
Correct.
As an interviewing manager, I don't look at degrees. I don't look at your college education. I look at your business experience. And if you don't have any, you better be coming with something that shows me that you're good at Power BI, which is what we recommend in all the other podcasts. You want to stand apart. You want the job as a kid, as a young adult in college. Build something. Show me that you're doing something outside of somebody spoon feeding you something at college, because your college degree doesn't equate to you being a good worker.
Correct.
So you raised two thoughts in my head, and one is, I don't know if you guys took any time to look at job applications for what you currently are now,
Ooh,
and basically look
I
at
did
their
not.
requirements. Go, not gonna make it. Like, and there's so much on, like, math, like the minimum requirements.
Yep.
And obviously, I know
Yep.
that
MBAs
always
everywhere now.
pie in the sky, but like this, like, experience and the education, it's like it has to be one of these degrees. Like it has to be in this focus area. So if I were to submit my resume now, despite, or any of us, what we did with the just submitting the resume on a online submission form, it might not get filtered out before someone even looks at it because of the education. That's the first thought, which I kind of find hilarious, which leads me to my next question is the reason why, because I'm still amazed kind of that there's no real direct path if you want to do business intelligence of like a set college degree. Like I was talking to my wife about this. I'm like, could a doctor technically learn everything online and be able to diagnose someone,
WebMD, baby.
or an engineer, right? Or an engineer, could they learn everything they learned in college online?
But
I
there's
I
also
would want someone with a doctor have their experience, education.
no. I agree with you 100%. But I also would say to those points, Tommy. There's a very strong bar you must cross, and I feel like when you start going down the doctor and even in the engineering route, if you want to become a professional engineer, a PE, what they call them, if you want to get down to that level, there are essentially like bar exams, like lawyer, like
Sure.
exams you
Yep.
need to take to
Yeah.
get over a number of years to prove you know what you're talking about. There is nothing like that in our data space. There is no, like in statistics even, are you black
Mhm.
belt certified? It's like a third party someone has stood up and said, these are the core concepts that you need to acknowledge and know that this is required to get to that bar. And so there are, IBCS, I think is what one of the companies that does this. It's a standard for business reporting and visualization stuff. So there are some standards that have been adopted and brought in by the industry. But to your point, Tommy, that like there really isn't a certifying body or bar or threshold that you need to make to hit Power BI level. And so I think that's one of the harder areas about this particular area, and maybe even IT for that matter, right?
Mhm.
You can get Microsoft certs, and that kind of tells people that you can read and study and learn stuff there. But in these other areas where we know like there's requirements to hit and there's tests to be run and there's large governing bodies around that information, I think that's why those are there. But
Yeah.
in those cases though, the schooling is looking to develop people and put them into a job, right? So like I'm going to be a doctor. Like we know we need doctors in the future. We know we need engineers in the future. So we've got to build a pipeline to get people who are interested in that through that pipeline and
Sure.
into that career. And I think there's a lot of other careers that are not like that. And this is like one of these careers that I think is we don't have to have there's not like really a good pipeline to go
No.
find data people and put them into this. And even that whole IT and computer space, there's not a lot there either.
So you raised something that I find interesting is like, for one, my brother-in-law, he's in logistics, and if he wants to get promoted, so to speak, there are levels.
Yep.
So it's like 1 through like I think 14. So like there's a clear path for him if he education experience.
Yep.
For us, we can't even decide, and no one can agree on our title. What's a
Yes.
data analyst? What's
Yes.
a business analyst?
Are
What's
you
a
a
solution-
report author? Are you a data engineer?
Right. Yeah. If you're applying for a job
Right.
and you're like, oh, I'm a data analyst, it could mean something completely
That's
different in
true.
another company.
That's so
Which
true.
is kind of insane that it's all very ambiguous in terms of even department. It could be within company. 2 people could do the same thing, 2 different titles.
Yes.
And maybe it's also because our field is still relatively new. Like obviously, law has been around for quite a while.
Yep.
And
Sure.
business intelligence was kind of again a subset of IT because you could really only use like SSRS or
Yep.
that was the only way to do it. But now it's really more business facing.
This is a good point.
So is there and I say this because engineering, I'll never forget hearing the story that they're basically the company of engineers, and half of them only had high school degrees, and they've been there for 40 years.
Yep.
And the company had a major layoff. So these people who've done literally their jobs well, successful for 40 years,
Laid off.
now couldn't get a job because they had no college degree in engineering.
Correct.
So I wonder if it's one of those where maybe not right now, there's no set path. If you want to do business intelligence, there's really no path, but maybe as it matures in 5 years, what do you guys think? Or does it evolve too much? So
Man, like here the path, right? What is the path? The path would be like, one, colleges we already know are on antiquated technology because rarely how many of them are engaged in the most latest of what's going on with technology, and it's rapidly increasing, right? To Mike's point,
those
if
are
we're not
only like the
teaching Power BI in
PhD.
college.
Yeah, those are like the
right?
PhD level. Like when you
Like-
get to like the stuff that's like the bleeding edge, it's not in like it's not your bachelor's.
Yeah.
It's in the higher education where they're actually trying to push the bounds because these
And I'm not
professors
saying
are figuring things out.
I'm not saying fundamentals of things aren't
Yeah.
important. And yes, you guys are right. There are absolutely tons of things out there that require a degree or more training or things you need to know how to do.
Sure.
But there's a large swath where obviously, even with our varied backgrounds, is something I'm much more familiar with, where like our best workers or people I enjoyed working with the most were from restaurants.
Yep.
Like they had no business experience and you just teach them data.
Yep.
Right?
Mhm.
And
Yep.
you teach them how to and work ethic was there. The problem with what you're saying, Tommy, is like colleges and things, and I could be stepping on a line, so maybe people will tell me to shut up.
Here we go.
But in the
Oh,
past,
boy.
though, think about it. A college degree meant something.
Yeah.
It meant you were going to get a job that you could sustain yourself.
Yeah, it's that pipeline.
What you learned.
Even if you build a pipeline towards like a BI degree, and there are things out there, there are no guarantees in the job market. So here's a wild thought for you. What I love this one.
Uh-oh.
I am.
What company wouldn't make a guarantee to a young intern that said, hey, if you want to give us $100,000 for your kid to come and work here for free, we'll teach him everything we know about our business so that and we'll guarantee you, like, we'll give him 2 years worth afterwards of employment. What's more valuable, the college degree where there's no guarantees, or you paying somebody for direct experience to teach your kid something?
Well,
You're
So
guaranteed something, man.
no,
If you want
and
to, I
then
know
you
a
get
guy
to know
right now.
people.
I know a guy right now. He wants to send his kid to college because of relationships, etc. He just happens to be in our user group. You want to pay me the college tuition? I will send your kid over, man. I will put him right next to me, and he'll learn more in 6 months than he would learn in 4 years related to business intelligence, how to work in a business or whatever, right?
And and I do not disagree with you
I'm being
at all,
flippant, but
because I mean you could do a college course or a few courses around data modeling, data visualization,
yeah,
Correct.
but
KPIs, and those
it's
are
the
relatively
experience.
stay the same, right? But
Yep.
again, I think it goes back to what we've said multiple times on this podcast, that you can learn that. Anyone can
Sure.
learn that. I
It's
think we're all very good use
Yep.
cases of, you can teach someone how to create a star schema. You can create someone how to
Yeah.
be efficient in DAX, but and again, to actually get a job and to be successful. And I think that's the other part I don't want to miss on this conversation, is not just, are you working in Power BI, but can you excel in it?
Yeah.
Because again, it's that whole idea of what I think what you guys say, and I think it's part of my mantra now too. I'm ready to get the tattoo, but it's that true idea of think like the business, act like IT.
Yep.
And that is the difference here, is not so much just reporting. Reporting was SSRS, and you also did a lot of, and IT. And IT gets such a bad rep, I think, on this podcast. And I don't know if I don't know if it really constitutes. I think IT needs to be a revisited conversation on what it is. But for what we do in terms of be successful, you can read a data viz book. I think
Yep.
I struggle with data viz because you should, I am a very, I let my wife actually look at the colors a lot too, because it just doesn't jive well. But
Yep.
you can teach someone those, but there's intangibles.
Yeah. So what I would say here is I think a lot of what we're talking about here is, the reason the whole system of colleges was established is kind of to what your point earlier was, right? Companies, we needed to figure out a pipeline to get people from not knowing a lot of things to knowing something specific so we can start pushing them into careers to fill future jobs for stuff. That's kind of it's part of that pipeline thing. And I think what we're seeing here is the data and maybe even the IT space for that matter. There's information technology majors, right? You can do information technology pieces
Mhm.
that are geared more towards this, and maybe I haven't bumped into a lot of them. Maybe the what that class is or how that's being people are trying to get into it. Maybe there's not enough emphasis on what's going on there. But I think at the end of the day, companies are setting the tone on a lot of this,
Mhm.
right? So the company set the tone on how they're going to hire, and if they're going through resumes, and again, I'm looking at it from I'm taking maybe the devil's advocate side here to Seth's, right? So I love your idea, Seth. Put my child into or my kid into some sort of program where they are able to get real world experience, understand if they even like doing that stuff, and they're going to get much more out of it, I think. But by putting them into a company. On the other hand, though, companies have so many options. Like if you put a Power BI position out there, you will get hundreds of resumes you can go weed through. And so how do you look again, this is where I think things fall apart a little bit is how do I boil someone down to a single sheet of paper? Like what you did. And it's very hard to get through that on a single sheet of paper. And so what companies are doing is because there is so many people saying they know Power BI, it's hard to critically evaluate them into like you actually know it. You're going to be you have grit, you have personality, you have emotional intelligence. There's a whole bunch of other intangibles that you can't get out of that resume. And so for some reason, like companies hiring managers, and I think Seth, you may be an exception to this because you have experience of other things that have told you otherwise, that companies are coming in and saying, I need these people to be an MBA. I need these people to be minimum a college degree because there's so much to pick from. They're using some bars of measurement
right.
to
But
weed out that list.
we've talked about this at length, right?
Yeah.
And sure, if a company's saying bar none, you need to have a bachelor's degree or a master's, then they should be like, in my mind, it's the wrong way. Like, it's not the company for me, right?
Yep.
Or the person who doesn't have a degree, it's not for them. I had one. I don't think that helped me in the path that I went.
Yep.
But if you think about, like, if I'm going to compare two candidates, do I want the candidate that has a college degree and is asking for 30,000 more as a base level because they have massive debt to pay off? Or do I want the one that shows me Power BI, shows me something that like they've done, and interacts with the community or does other things that shows me they're learning and is $30,000 less? I will always take the person I have to teach because they're both coming out of like an unknown space.
Yep.
Like, college and the education that you get, frankly, even the further you go, like, you talk to many people in businesses, there's a hard transition between people who are coming from educational backgrounds into business. And the longer you're in the educational background through master's, PhD, etc., and you're just scaling out your academic experience, that's a hard transition into business. And like, talk to people who know in tech spaces, and they'll be like, dude, there's no way I'm hiring a PhD.
So
Never.
I work with
Can I-
PhDs, and I've always said they're like herding cats.
can I propose a question for you guys? Let's say tomorrow morning you wake up, you get an email from James Phillips. He's retiring, and he's also retiring the Power Platform and Azure. Just not a viable solution anymore. What are you doing now? Because I think we're all taking this assumption like
This is a good
we're
point.
very skilled in Power BI, but
Yeah.
can
doing
you
the same thing I
guarantee
did
in
before.
10 years, like
I go over to
There are no
AWS.
guarantees. There are no guarantees. You learn
right,
something
there
new.
are no guarantees.
Yeah.
So,
You
but-
learn something new. Did like 10, 15 years ago, did somebody say, hey, Seth, in 10 years, you're gonna have to learn Power BI over SQL? No.
Yep.
Mhm.
Why am I where I'm at? Because I learned something new.
Right. And you had the opportunity at your job to learn too. It wasn't like something was shut off. Because again,
Sure.
it goes back to
Sure.
Mhm.
if there was no Power BI and you're trying to get a job and that's your experience, like we put I put all my eggs in the Power BI basket when it first came out because I saw the value and I saw the the potential of it. And I still feel that to this day.
Yep.
But I think that starts to go away when you actually get your job. Like, when you get into the business,
Mhm.
then you have different qualifications,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Mhm.
then you can say, in the business, I succeeded at these things. Here's the relationships I built. These are my contacts that you can go ask. Like, hey, I'm an interviewing manager. Like, talk to me how Mike, is as a coworker. Oh man, like, he
Yeah.
teaches everybody. He, here's all the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Oh, well, that is the quality of person that I want to hire.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
then you're off this first stage of how do you get into the business world,
Yeah.
which I think is where the topic of this conversation is
Right.
most relevant.
Yeah. And I think with this college degree and what we're kind of talking about is the net, so to speak, or like the foundation of anyone who's in Power BI right now. Like if you're just a Power BI reporter or you're a director of BI, right? So obviously we understand the solution, the tool, but in a sense, I don't want to say what is plan B, but
But
I guess
But that is a good point, right? And that's
Yeah.
why I say there's legs on this argument that I'm making that I'm going to explore a lot further, which is, what do I do as plan B? Well, if my kid has experienced 8 different internships in the span of 2 years or something, right? Maybe his plan B was something he really enjoyed and worked for 3 or 4 months on, right? Like, has practical life experience. And that's what part of this is too, right?
yeah,
Is you look at where you were as an individual. You go through, like, they say you're going to have however many different jobs. Well, why don't you jumpstart that in a kid's career, like in a kid's life,
Well,
by
it's like-
building all those life experiences?
yeah, it's now like isn't the average like every 2 or 3 years someone is expecting to move between jobs? So a couple things that are
Yeah.
happening. There's some trends that are happening that I think
that's-
that
That's
schools can't.
85% of
Right.
people our age
How
get the
fast
salary
tech is
increase
moving.
by-
And, well, how
Right.
fast in general everything's moving, right? I think there's certain things that are going through very quickly now, and so I was talking with someone about this,
like
and,
DAX AI.
well, and there's oh boy, let's not get started on that one. That's another whole topic all by itself. But as you look at like
I
the
mean,
the technology, like you would if you got a career as like long ago, right? Let's say my dad was a teacher his entire life, moved from one school to another school. That's it, his entire life. But that was like that era was around get a job, be stable, get good at it, and just kind of just do that job. And so I think now the expectation is I like to try different things, and things are changing so fastly that there's a lot of opportunities that
Yeah.
are arising very quickly. And so you're not reinventing yourself every 20 or 30 years prior. You're now able to reinvent yourself every 2 or 3 years. And you can
And
actually
what's
look
the-
at
Yeah.
And
the
so-
prevailing theory, right? You
Yeah.
adapt. You have to.
you have to adapt.
yeah.
You've got to be a constant learner. You got to have grit to figure out how to do the thing you need to do to move to the next step. And so I want to answer Tommy's question because I didn't get to earlier. What happens if James Phillips says, "Nope, we're done. This was a bad
or
idea.
AI.
We're gonna turn it all off," right? We put too much AI on top of it. No one's using it. We're gonna turn it all off. So if he turns all that stuff off, and here we are, no power platform. What I would say though is I feel like there's a trend that can't be stopped, which is devices and thing creating data. And so anywhere you can tie yourself to computers making, managing, moving around data, that will be a secure move. And so I made a decision way back when I started looking at this data thing and get to this analyst position in my former career in the corporate space was data, and the company was doing research on this. Data is growing exponentially, and it's like doubling faster and
Mhm.
faster, and we're making more data all the time. And so we're going to make I don't know what the statistic is, but we're going to make more data in the next 5 or 10 years than has ever been made in the history of computers. Like that's phenomenal to me. And the fact that there's so much information, we need people who can critically think about what is important there and you're going to have to aggregate it. And this is our argument about tables in Power BI. You can't drop a 1 million row table in Power BI. One, you can't see it all, but two, there's nothing insightful with it. You have to weed through so much information. At some level, you have to start aggregating things to a point where it makes sense to you. And so I think that's where the cloud technology is coming in. It's making this compute much more commoditized. And so now we're seeing this whole new spectrum of careers and jobs that are just showing up, and nothing has been able to solidify and standardize on like what is the bar to hit. I think we're on a very interesting inflection point for this data career thing. It's just now ramping up. Schools are just catching up with what companies need, and the same thing for programming. One of our user group members was talking about how Google paid for his entire education around programming stuff, a whole class. And I thought
he's an educator.
and he's an educator. I thought that was amazing. Well, and Google was being like, so how does this stuff change? I think this stuff changes when companies are coming in and saying, we are looking at this new way of teaching, or we're looking at this new platform of how we get like
yeah.
maybe it's EDX, maybe it's some other online something that learns things, right? Companies have to come in and say, doing things this way carries weight with me, and I will hire people. A company has to put their brand or their value on top of whatever that educational thing is. And when companies align with that, that's when that thing, whatever that may be, that training, the Power BI training, whatever that is, once companies jump on board and say, this means something, people can then do it. And then it becomes more of that pipeline.
So you say a few things about the influx of data and then what you're looking for, and I'll train you. So because kind of aligned with someone actually said, Rafael, don't worry, I wouldn't worry, robots will take over our jobs. Well, you see the push they're already doing, and not saying like, oh, that's going to be everything, but there's going to be a lot more of that in terms of you saying, I'm very experienced in DAX. Like, well, in 5 years, you can really just type it, but that still doesn't mean your job, like that it took over your job. It doesn't. Again, you don't know. I listened to a song the other day that AI wrote, so who knows? If they can play the piano, they can build a dashboard. I'm I'm going to assume that at some point. But the biggest thing is when it
Someone's
comes
got to
to
build
like
the AI at some point. I want to
from an
be.
educate,
I've always to
yeah,
that answer. Everyone says so like, well, what happens when AI takes away your job? I'm like, okay, I just want to be the guy who makes the AI.
yeah.
That's what I want to be.
And then there's the data science. But the other point that you said I really want to get to was you said, you know, like Mike and Seth, is about adapting, and it's like, oh, we have to be able to adapt.
Yes.
I'm going to take it one step further, and I think when what we do in IT, and especially this platform, it's not just being able to adapt, but it's identifying. I mean, like it's almost just as important as learning the skills now as seeing where the trends are.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
what if I looked at Power BI when it first came out? Like, this is dumb. I'm going to use Quilk, you know, like kind of thing. And it's like, that's where being able to kind of identify what are people using, where's going to be adoption, and where do you put your skills? Because I can't rely on the skills I have right now in the next 5 years. If I
So-
stay at, and so where do you invest your time in your education?
Right. Ultimately, I think it comes back to what is another saying we do all the time on the show. Is this saving me money or making me money?
Mhm.
Right. We push for people
Yep.
to better themselves all the time. Not everybody's like that. The difference between college in the past and college today is college in the past was a fraction of the cost,
Agreed.
did not put a burden, and I mean a huge
Mhm.
burden on every worker from day one to pay off massive debts with zero guarantees. Does that sound like a sound investment? Right? Like, and if your argument is experience, I can think of a hundred different ways to have my child experience things
Yes.
in a 4-year period that isn't going to cost me $100,000
Yep.
or more.
Sure.
Right? Because you're not guaranteeing a better life. And that's where I think what's happening right now is there's starting to be a disconnect between what a degree means
Yep.
in the value of a business. Because if it's just costing me more money and I get the same output by finding the right individual, I'm always going to, as a business, take the person I can teach the thing I need them to learn, because they're not going to know what they need to know to take a first time job.
Yep.
Like in data, right? Specific to areas that are wide open, that don't need a specific college degree, all in these areas. I'm just saying, like, there's better value for the money out there from my perspective right now, because I think companies are adopting more of an open strategy of we're trying to find the best people. And sometimes those best people don't go to college.
And I also think you're seeing something here. A trend that's interesting too is we're looking at a pandemic where a lot of people has left the workforce. There's a need for more people to get back into the workforce, and we're having to entice them to get in there. If you look at the 1920, when there was the last recession, there was a huge kind of like the economy kind of had to like jumpstart itself again, and finding people to find work and was a very challenging thing, and wages went up very high because or increased quickly because they needed to get people back into the workforce here. So I think there's a couple things going on, right? There's this new area, and again, tech is. I mean, you look at all the guys who did like Microsoft, like all the people who were in tech to begin. They're like Facebook dropout, Microsoft dropouts. Like these people knew what they were doing and they were very good at what they were doing, but they had vision to like. Uh, in all those cases, someone saw a problem and was able to address the problem with a solution that was technology, a new solution. It made their pain go away. And I think this is what if you can put yourself in a position where you can be helping other people remove pain from their daily job workflows, whatever that is, I think you will be needed everywhere. I think that is a very clear path. Whatever you're doing, if you can make other people's jobs easier, remove pain, or make it simpler to use whatever that thing is, that's the value we're adding.
So I'll make a kind of a final thought on that, because I'm thinking, Seth, like you're thinking of your kids. My kids are younger, but there's still the thought of like, okay, what do you invest in college? Part of it could be what if they don't want to do technology? Like, what if my daughter wants to be an interior designer? Like as of right now, our field is pretty, technology in general is usually kind of more male centric. But so what if my daughter's like, it's not for me, like, kind of thing. Like, I don't know a lot of people, I don't have a lot of friends, I'm not interested, right? So how do you know that she's going to like that before college, right? That, I think that's one of the questions. And unfortunately, too, just like we had to learn about Abraham Lincoln in high school, coding is going to probably be one of the classes in high school too. And it's one of those,
High
well, you
school.
got to do coding if you want to go to college.
My
If
son's
you-
already learning block programming right now, and
My
and
goodness.
he's not even in high
So-
school. So like
so-
this is a skill. Our kids, and I'm looking at like the Power Platform in general, low code, no code solutions. I'm looking at this thing and going, this is the stuff, and it's even beyond this, right? I'm seeing it right now and looking like a couple of years ahead and saying, well, this is the kind of stuff my kids are going to be learning. They're going to be talking to their
Mhm.
computers. It'll be making automatic things for you. The need, Microsoft has touted this. The number of apps required in the future is huge, is a massive amount, and you don't get companies to be successful unless you give more of an automated way of building apps. And so that Power Apps thing is like a huge investment area that they're putting into. So I just see, to your point, Tommy, our kids are going to do things way different than we are, and we're not even going to see how cool it's going to be in 10, 15 years when they get into the workforce and they start doing this stuff. They've grown up with the internet. We were just barely getting it. I remember dial-up. Like, some of us didn't even grow up with the internet.
Especially, yeah.
I remember I had a
listen,
gateway.
like
the actual
I'm
gateway.
gonna parting shot here, right? Like, I think learning is obviously something that I'm keyed into having my kids stay on track
100%.
with. I'm not sold it's college.
Yeah.
And by the time they get around to that point,
We'll see. Maybe something
unless
changes.
unless that value prop changes,
Yep.
I think the market where we are, no, you don't need a degree
Yeah.
for Power BI.
Agreed.
But if you don't have one, do the things that we've recommended you do to set yourself apart from all the other resumes.
Exactly.
So yeah, Seth, the last thing I'll say is I hope not to, like for my kids too. I hope there's other avenues that are more direct where they don't have to do college either. Like, we'll see where when it's
I would
there,
like,
but
you know what? We should start a new college, right?
Send your
like my
kids to-
idea.
send your
Straight
kids to
up
my dorm-
internships.
Yeah.
we need an
Straight up
intern for the
internship.
podcast.
There's got to be something.
Power
out there,
BI
right?
Tips
Like 3 to
University.
6,
Tips
3 to
University.
yeah. Tips. There you
Do we need an
go.
intern for the podcast? So-
Send us over your children, and we'll pay us
well,
$100,000.
We'll just charge you the norm, right? Like,
yeah.
I'm done,
but-
right?
We're
yeah.
done. That's it.
I would say for anyone listening, and I think for us too, I think it starts with people in the space to take a chance on people who may not have the experience but have those, what we've talked about, those intangibles.
Yeah.
So if we
Yeah.
say, oh, well, I can't hire anyone that has less than 3 years of Power BI. Yeah. So anyways, but yeah, I think this was excellent, guys.
This was a really good conversation. It's a hard topic. I think we had some good ideas here. We'll be first and foremost, we're not
Not
the ones to solve
experts.
any of this one. We're not experts. This is, I think of a quip this morning, like, explicit measures where the ideas are real, but the opinions are false, or something weird like that.
It's born from experience, but at the same time, like we're not professional. Well, I was going to say we're not professional educators, but you are, Mike. So never mind. Count it.
One
Count it
and
all.
3. Awesome. Well, Tommy, give us a wrap. Where can you find the podcast?
You can find the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. Make sure to subscribe on Apple or Spotify. When you do, please try to leave a review and a rating. It really helps us out. Join live in the conversation Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7:30 a.m. Central Time. And by far what we ask the most and what means the most to us is if you do like the podcast, you like what we're talking about,
Yep.
Please spread the word. Tell somebody.
Just tell one other
share it.
person about what
Yeah.
if you found value from this podcast, just tell one more person about the podcast and let them know this was cool. Hit the subscribe button if you want to catch us live and chat with us in the chat window while we do these events live. And with that, it's another Tuesday in the books, gentlemen. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on Thursday.